Hey, what's up, everybody? Star35 here, bringing you guys a new video. And recently, I was made aware of this tweet by Jason Schreier where he mentioned how long video game production cycles have gotten. And it made me think more about how I feel about the games in this current era these days. Like, for the past few years, I felt like that most AAA video games have become too long and bloated in terms of game content. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that every game needs to be like 5 hours long or anything like that. But some of the big budget games that have released over the years, I find like the amount of time needed to put into them to finish them to be a bit off-putting. These days, I don't really have as much time to play games as I used to. You take a job of being a game developer and wind up not having much time to actually play games. Oh, the irony. Oh, the dark irony. But basically, I have other responsibilities and things in life to do these days, so I don't have the time to pour a lot of my free time into like really huge time sink games. Like, I wish games were able to go back to relying on replayability to up a game's length instead of just shoving as much content into the game as they possibly can to pad the time. And it's usually content that ends up overstaying its welcome and becoming tedious by the time you finish all of it anyways. Like, for instance, the games I grew up playing weren't the longest games, but they had other things going on for them that made you want to replay the game or do something better the next playthrough, or find other secrets and things like that. And that's where the game's longevity came from. And some games were shorter, but they had a decent bit of difficulty to them, so you have to keep then you have to play more to get to the end. So that's where how shorter games made up for being short. You got some playtime out of it by having to replay sections or part of the game to in order to finally get past it. It would be nice if game studios were able to narrow their scope and make smaller games, where at least like the AAA studios were able to do this. Because it's like nowadays, every sequel or every game in general just has to be bigger and bigger, and then the cost of production of these games grows exponentially every time to make up for it. How much bigger and how much more content packed like these games have to be. This actually reminds me of an article I read some years ago about how Gears of War 4 would cost Epic like $100 million to make it. Like, that's crazy. And like, with the way AAA games need to be made today in order to appeal to people, so people don't freak out and trash the game because it's not long enough, there's not enough to do in it or whatever. So with the way AAA games need to be made today, they eventually will meet or exceed that budget of games costing straight up $100+ million to make, if it hasn't met that budget expectations already. And that's just not sustainable. Like, that level of money makes devs not want to take risks with games and ideas and stuff, and then things just get like more stale and samey over time and stuff, and that's just a whole separate conversation for a whole nother time. It just makes me miss the PS1 and PS2 era of games, where games weren't as huge and complex to make as back then, so you could get a fully featured sequel to your favorite game like a year or two after the first one. Like, seriously, go look up how long it took for sequels to games like Crash Bandicoot, Spyro, and Sly Cooper to come out. Nowadays, it's almost hard to believe those games came out as good as they did in that kind of time frame that they did back then. But that was the benefit of games not being as huge and complex to make back then as they are now. And today, you can't even get a full featured game anymore. And they gotta have even more powerful hardware and more time between release dates, and you still can't get a fully featured game these days. And depending on which studio is making them, because everything has to wind up being DLC or patched in later or something like that. But yeah, so many AAA games these days feeling like they need to be 60, 70, 100+ hours long. It's just a big turnoff to me nowadays. Like, I've always enjoyed games that were on the shorter side and never had any problem with them. But these days, I really appreciate shorter games. Like, I swear, playing some games these days, it almost seems like it's like a whole other job or a whole other life, with the amount of time you want you to put into the amount of time they want you to dedicate to playing these games is to see everything that it has to offer. Because, whenever I play games, I always like to, see everything the game has to offer, do most stuff in the games. And, you got games like Dying Light 2 that was advertising like over 500 hours of content or whatever. I'm like, no, 500 hours? Are you insane? I'm not gonna sit here and play one single game for like 500 hours like that. Like I can't do it. Like that number of hours for one game is insane to me these days. I can't imagine putting that much time into a game right now. And also, it'd be nice if devs had more time to work on games with these big ass production cycles that they have now. So that way the devs wouldn't have to rush and crunch and wind up putting out a half-assed or already broken product like we see countless times, again and again. It's a miracle if a game comes out and isn't buggy or in need of a patch soon after these days. Like, I think the console cycle should last longer and then give the devs more time to learn and become familiar with the hardware and wind up making better games and stuff like that. Like, you remember the games. Remember how good games were getting towards like the end of the PS3 and 360 by the time they got the hang of how the hardware works and things like that? That could be a pretty good benefit. And that could also lead to them being able to make and release more than one game per generation, which could lead to more games for people to enjoy. But yeah, seeing that tweet just made me want to make this kind of like rant video, because like I've been thinking about like the length and content size of games a lot these days. And whenever a new game comes out where it says it's like 60 or more hours, I'm like, dude, that's a lot of time. To me nowadays, 60 hours seems like a pretty decent and chunky time length for one game nowadays. So I would prefer games to be like below 60 hours to play. Like, maybe that's like 20-30 hour game. I feel like that would be nice if more AAA games were able to be like that. And, it's just one of a few reasons why I don't really play too many newer AAA games these days. But anyway, I'm Star35 and I'm out. Please don't forget to rate and comment and subscribe. Peace.